Have you ever booted up a fighting game and felt completely overwhelmed on the character select screen? This is a common thing, especially for those who are newcomers to the FGC. Also, it's not like fighting game developers are super good at suggesting things to newcomers as a whole. It's a design philosophy that fighters just haven't modernized. If you look at the history of fighting games, they were arcade games first designed to eat your quarters, so their design is somewhat hostile towards newcomers to start with. Basically, the rule of cool is how most people select the first character they learn in fighting games. That does sometimes work out. However, it's not the most efficient way of learning the game, and since the arcade scene is essentially dead, it's time for fighting games to modernize. So, how can fighting games improve themselves simply and easily? Guilty Gear Strive does kind of tell players what to expect from a character with the star system and telling them if they're an all-rounder or some other designation, which is great. But my idea is something else entirely. It'll maintain the star system and it'll say what archetype a character is, but this feature, if implemented, will make choosing that first character a much simpler and less trial and error process. So, what is the idea? This idea would be a search function of some type, or maybe even a quiz. Either could work. Basically, you click on a new section in the menu called Character Recommendations. You tell the game what your general skill level is, tell it what your speed preference is, and if you prefer your characters to be more aggressive, balanced, or defensively minded. The game will then spit out a list of character recommendations for you to try out and then let you queue up an arcade ladder as those characters or utilize some other game modes. After playing as the character for a short amount of time, you can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that character, thus allowing the AI to help narrow down your potential character options. As I stated in the intro, for newcomers and some intermediate level players, finding that first character can be exceptionally intimidating. The games I found most intimidating for this were Dead or Alive 5, as that was my first fighting game, and both the King of Fighters 14 and 15. For KOF, it was down to not knowing much about 2D fighting games at that point in time, and because of the sheer roster size. In the case of Dead or Alive, the rule of cool worked in my favor, as I found myself drawn to both Hitomi and Kokoro, with Kokoro being an intermediate character and Hitomi being the most beginner-friendly character on the roster. For the King of Fighters, yeah, I experienced a lot of teething pain to find characters I liked, and while that was part of the fun of the game, it meant my learning curve for the series was that much higher. Basically, in the modern era of fighting games, companies do need to bring in new blood, as the average FGC fan is in their late 20s to mid 40s, an age demographic that tends to leave the gaming industry because of life commitments. Now, with millennials and Generation Z, they're less likely to leave the gaming sphere as they grew up in it. However, it's still a good idea to get generations Alpha and Beta into the genre, because eventually those generations will be the target demographic of gaming companies. One of the ways to get the up-and-coming gamers into this genre of games is to streamline the process. What do I mean by streamlining, though? By streamlining, I don't mean simplifying the game and taking away features characters used to have. No, that's generally speaking a terrible idea. It's also a surefire way to alienate longtime fans of franchises. It kind of worked in Guilty Gear Strive's favor in terms of sales, but that's more of an outlier than it is the norm. Look at Dead or Alive 6, that game took away features from characters, and it bombed. No, by streamlining, I mean make it easier to get started with these games without alienating your core fanbase. This comes down to a plethora of things, one of them being more single-player content. The others are making it so players can pick up these games and not feel overwhelmed. By reducing the overwhelm factor, you reduce the barrier of entry significantly. Seriously, if you talk to anyone who's even mildly interested in trying out fighting games, they will more than likely tell you the reason they don't dip their toes in the waters is because they feel overwhelmed. Part of why they feel overwhelmed is because fighting games have really terrible tools at actually teaching you how to play the game and how to find stuff. I feel part of the blame lies in developers focusing more on the esports crowd, as they have some understanding of how these games work inherently. Basically, fighting games need to find a balancing act between the "oh wow, I discovered a cool thing" factor they've always had, and the need to appeal to not only younger demographics, but even older ones who are intimidated. Another thing that game developers could do to alleviate this overwhelming sensation for players is during the marketing blitz for these games. During the height of marketing, these developers should do little segments on the characters and who they'll be suited for. SNK did attempt this somewhat with the King of Fighters 15, as they did talk about skill level on their website in the character bios. However, they didn't do a good job at that either. Every character would have a For Beginners tag and then a star system. This was rather hard to tell if more stars or less stars indicated beginner friendly. As SNK didn't bother to explain their system, basically if you wanted to learn if a character was beginner friendly or not, you needed to talk with a friend or someone else online and ask about the character and hope they were knowledgeable on the game. Also with SNK's star system, there's some guesswork there as well. Vanessa, widely considered one of the hardest and least beginner-friendly characters in the game, was actually one of the characters that just clicked for me right away because her playstyle suits mine so well. Whereas King, who's supposed to be more beginner-friendly, I just couldn't get on with. Of the so-called beginner-friendly characters, the only ones I found easy to use were Robert Garcia and Leona Hydern. Again, it comes down to little things developers could do to improve the experience for the end user. One of those is better teaching tools, and honestly some kind of character recommendation system would be helpful. Also, as the game gathers more data on your playstyle, it could even tailor-make recommendations for the more advanced players to try out. This tool would even be useful to them as it would allow them to try out new characters that might wind up winning them some tournaments if they're lucky. But what are your thoughts on this potential feature, and what are some features you'd like to see in future fighting games to make games a little more user-friendly? Comment below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can check out my Twitch, www.twitch.tv/Lever90. I'd love to see you in the ring. Also, why not check out one of my other videos.